What are you doing outside? Where is Elena?
Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about trust, love, and the people we let into our children's lives. My name is Marcus, and this is the story of how I almost lost everything that mattered to me, because I trusted the wrong person with my most precious treasures. This isn't just another story about betrayal or heartbreak. This is about the kind of evil that wears a smile, the kind of darkness that pretends to be light, and the kind of love that refuses to be destroyed, no matter what forces try to tear it apart. This is about 3 little children who survived the unthinkable, and about a father who almost lost them forever, because he was blind to the monster living in his own home. But before I continue, I need you to do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. You have no idea how many hours go into researching, writing, and producing these stories for you. Every single detail you're about to hear required countless hours of interviews, fact-checking, and careful storytelling to bring you the truth. Your support means everything to us. And drop your country in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from today. When I think back to the beginning of this nightmare, I realize all the signs were there. But when you're grieving, when you're overwhelmed, when someone presents themselves as your savior, you don't look for the cracks in their facade. You don't question the motives of someone who seems to love your children as much as you do. That was my first mistake, but it wouldn't be my last. I want you to listen carefully to every detail, because somewhere in your life, there might be an Elena waiting to strike. There might be someone you trust completely, who is planning to destroy everything you hold dear. And if my story can save even one family from going through what we endured, then sharing these painful memories will have been worth it. I was 32 years old when my world first fell apart. Sarah and I had been married for 6 years, and we had 3 beautiful children together, triplets named Lily, Mason, and Emma. They were 4 years old, full of life and laughter, the kind of kids who could light up a room just by walking into it. Lily was our little artist, always drawing pictures and making up stories. Mason was our adventurer, climbing everything in sight and asking a million questions about how things worked. Emma was our peacemaker, the one who would comfort her siblings when they were hurt and share her toys without being asked. Sarah and I had built what I thought was a solid life together. I worked as a long-haul trucker, which meant I was away from home for days at a time, but the money was good, and it allowed Sarah to stay home with the kids. When I was home, we were a happy family. We'd have movie nights, go to the park, take weekend trips to visit my parents. The kids adored their mother, and Sarah seemed to love being a mom. But addiction is a thief that steals everything good in its path, and it came for my wife like a silent predator. It started small. Prescription pain medication after a minor surgery that Sarah couldn't seem to stop taking. Then it escalated to stronger pills. Then to things I don't even want to name. I watched the woman I loved disappear before my eyes, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The fights became constant. I would come home from a week on the road to find the house in chaos, the children hungry and scared, and Sarah either passed out or so high she couldn't form coherent sentences. I tried everything. Rehab programs, interventions, threats, pleading, bargaining. Nothing worked. Sarah was drowning, and she was determined to take our family down with her. The final straw came on a cold January morning when I returned home early from a delivery to find my 3 babies, my precious 4-year-olds, alone in the house. Sarah was nowhere to be found. The kids were hungry, dirty, and terrified. They had been taking care of themselves for who knows how long. Lily, had been trying to make cereal for her brother and sister. Standing on a chair to reach the cabinet, Mason had wet himself because he was too scared to go to the bathroom alone. Emma was crying because she missed her daddy and didn't understand why mommy kept leaving them. That day, I made the hardest decision of my life. I packed up my children and we left. I filed for divorce and fought for full custody. And after months of legal battles and heartbreak, I won. Sarah's addiction had made her unfit to care for our children, and the court agreed. She was granted supervised visitation rights, but she rarely used them. The drugs were more important to her than her own babies. So there I was, a single father to 3 4-year-olds, trying to figure out how to be both mother and father, while maintaining a career that required me to be away from home. It was the most challenging time of my life, but also, in some ways, the most rewarding. My children and I grew closer than ever. We developed routines and traditions that became sacred to us. Friday nights were pizza and movie nights. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and cartoons. Sunday afternoons were for adventures, trips to the zoo, hikes in the woods, visits to museums. The kids adapted better than I expected. They missed their mother, of course, but they seemed to understand that Daddy was doing his best to take care of them. They became more independent, more helpful, more appreciative of the time we spent together. When I had to go on the road for work, I arranged for them to stay with my parents or with trusted babysitters. I called them every night, read them bedtime stories over the phone, and counted the hours until I could come home to them. For 8 months, we managed this way. It wasn't easy, but we were making it work. The children were thriving in their new school, making friends, and slowly healing from the trauma of their mother's addiction. I was learning to balance work and parenting, and while I was exhausted most of the time, I was proud of what we had built together. Then my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. Dad had been my rock through the divorce and custody battle, always ready to help with the kids or offer advice when I felt overwhelmed. His death hit me harder than I expected, not just because I loved him, but because I realized how alone I truly was in raising my children. The funeral was devastating. My kids had adored their grandfather, and watching them say goodbye to him broke my heart all over again. They had already lost their mother to addiction, and now they were losing their grandfather to death. I worried about how much loss these little hearts could take. It was at the funeral that I first really noticed Elena. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they weren't who you thought they were? Share your experience in the comments below. Elena Martinez was everything I thought I needed at that moment in my life. She was a friend of my sister-in-law, someone who had come to pay her respects to my father, and when she approached me after the service, her presence felt like a warm light in the darkness of my grief. She was beautiful in an understated way. Long dark hair that she wore pulled back in an elegant bun, kind brown eyes that seemed to see right through to your soul, and a gentle smile that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that caught my attention. It was the way she interacted with my children. While other adults at the funeral offered awkward condolences and then moved on, Elena got down on their level. She listened when Lily told her about the picture she had drawn for Grandpa. She answered Mason's questions about where people go when they die with patience and honesty. She held Emma when she started crying, rocking her gently until the tears stopped. "Your children are beautiful," she said to me as we stood by my father's graveside. "You can see how much love you've poured into them. Your father would be so proud of the man and father you've become." Those words meant more to me than she could have known. In the midst of my grief and exhaustion, I had been questioning everything. Whether I was doing right by my kids, whether I was strong enough to raise them alone, whether they would be okay without their mother and now without their grandfather. Elena seemed to understand my struggle without me having to explain it. Single parenting is the hardest job in the world, she said softly. But you're not alone. There are people who care about you and want to help. Over the following weeks, Elena became a regular presence in our lives. She would stop by with dinner when she knew I'd had a long day. She would offer to watch the kids when I had to run errands or attend meetings about my father's estate. She never imposed herself or made me feel like I owed her anything. She just showed up, quietly and consistently, making our lives a little easier. The children took to her immediately. Elena had a natural way with kids that reminded me of how Sarah used to be before the addiction took hold. She would play their games without seeming bored or distracted. She remembered their favorite foods, their bedtime routines, their little quirks and preferences. When Mason scraped his knee playing in the backyard, he ran to Elena for comfort. When Lily wanted to show off her latest drawing, Elena was the first person she thought of. When Emma had a nightmare, Elena was there with warm milk and gentle words. She's like a fairy godmother, Lily said to me one evening after Elena had helped her with a particularly challenging puzzle. She makes everything better. I found myself looking forward to Elena's visits more than I wanted to admit. After months of carrying the weight of single parenthood alone, having someone to share the load with felt like a gift from heaven. Elena would help with homework while I cooked dinner. She would read bedtime stories while I cleaned up the kitchen. She would listen to my concerns about the kids' adjustment to their new life and offer thoughtful advice. But more than the practical help, Elena provided something I hadn't realized I was desperately missing: adult companionship. After the kids went to bed, we would sit on the porch or in the living room, talking about everything and nothing. She would tell me about her work as a pediatric nurse at the local hospital, sharing stories that made me laugh or touched my heart. I would tell her about life on the road, about the places I'd seen and the people I'd met. Elena was an excellent listener. She would ask thoughtful questions and remember details from previous conversations. She seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions, and she had a way of making me feel heard and understood. After months of conversations that revolved entirely around cartoon characters and playground politics, having someone to talk to about adult topics felt like coming back to life. "You know," she said one evening as we sat watching the sunset from my back porch, "your father raised an incredible son. The way you've stepped up for those children, the sacrifices you've made, the love you show them every day, it's remarkable." I felt my cheeks warm at the compliment. "I'm just doing what any father would do." "No," Elena said firmly. "You're doing what a great father does. There's a difference. A lot of men would have crumbled under the pressure you've been under. A lot of men would have given up or taken the easy way out. But you chose to fight for your children, to put their needs above your own comfort. That takes real strength and character." Her words meant everything to me. In the midst of my daily struggles with parenting, work, and grief, I often felt like I was failing at everything. Elena's perspective helped me see that maybe I was doing better than I thought. As the weeks turned into months, Elena's presence in our lives became more natural and necessary. She had a key to the house so she could let herself in when she came to watch the kids. She knew where everything was: the first aid kit, the kids' favorite snacks, the phone numbers for their school and doctor. She had become part of our family routine in a way that felt organic and right. The children started referring to her as Miss Elena, and then just Elena, dropping the formal title as she became more like family than a friend. They would ask when she was coming over, save drawings and school projects to show her, and include her in their prayers at bedtime. "God bless Daddy," and Lily and Mason and Emma and Elena became Emma's standard bedtime prayer, and help Mommy Sarah get better and tell Grandpa we miss him. Hearing my daughter include Elena in her prayers alongside family members made my heart swell with gratitude, and something else I wasn't quite ready to name yet. It was around this time that Elena began sharing more about her own background. She had grown up in foster care after her mother abandoned her when she was 7 years old. She had never known her father, and her mother had been too young and too troubled to care for a child properly. I bounced around from home to home until I aged out of the system at 18, she told me one evening. Some of the families were kind, but none of them were permanent. I always knew I was temporary, that I could be moved at any time. It taught me to be self-reliant, but it also made me hungry for the kind of family stability I never had. Her story broke my heart and helped me understand why she was so good with my children. She knew what it felt like to be vulnerable and scared, to need someone to care for you and protect you. She understood the importance of consistency and reliability in a child's life. That's why I became a pediatric nurse, she continued. I wanted to be someone who helped children, who made them feel safe and cared for, even if it was just during their time in the hospital. Every child deserves to feel loved and protected. Elena's dedication to children was evident in everything she did. She would bring small gifts for my kids, not expensive toys, but thoughtful little things, like stickers, coloring books, or their favorite candy. She remembered their school events and would ask about their friends and teachers. She celebrated their small victories and comforted them through their disappointments. When Mason lost his first tooth, Elena was as excited as if she were his biological mother. She helped him write a letter to the Tooth Fairy and made sure the Tooth Fairy left an extra special surprise under his pillow. When Lily's class performed a play about community helpers, Elena took time off work to attend, cheering louder than anyone else in the audience. When Emma was struggling with reading, Elena spent hours working with her, using games and songs to make learning fun. "You're so good with them," I told Elena one evening, after she had successfully negotiated a peace treaty between Mason and Lily over a disputed toy. "You're a natural mother." Elena's smile faltered for just a moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Sadness, maybe, or longing. "I've always wanted children of my own," she said quietly, "but life hasn't worked out that way for me yet." "You're still young," I said. "There's plenty of time." "Maybe," she replied, but there was something in her tone that suggested she didn't quite believe it. As spring turned into summer, Elena and I began spending more time together as adults, not just as co-caregivers for the children. She would come over after the kids were asleep, and we would talk for hours about our hopes and dreams, our fears and regrets. She would tell me about her work at the hospital, about the children she cared for, and the families she helped through difficult times. I would share stories about my travels, about the different places I'd seen, and the interesting people I'd met on the road. These conversations felt like a lifeline to me. For so long, my entire identity had been wrapped up in being a father and provider. Elena reminded me that I was also a man with thoughts and feelings and dreams that extended beyond my children's immediate needs. "What do you want for your future?" she asked me, one warm June evening, as we sat on the porch swing my father had built years ago. I thought about her question seriously. "I want my kids to be happy and healthy and successful. I want them to know they're loved and supported, no matter what. I want to be the kind of father they can be proud of." "Those are beautiful goals," Elena said. "But what do you want for yourself? What would make Marcus happy?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on my children's needs that I hadn't really considered my own happiness in months. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I want to feel like I'm not just surviving anymore. I want to feel like I'm actually living." Elena reached over and took my hand, her fingers warm and soft against mine. "You deserve to be happy, Marcus. You deserve to have someone who loves you and supports you and shares the load with you. You don't have to carry everything alone." Her touch sent electricity through me, and I realized that somewhere along the way, My feelings for Elena had evolved from gratitude to something much deeper and more complicated. When you're going through a difficult time, how do you know if someone is genuinely trying to help you or if they have their own agenda? What red flags should people watch for? The first crack in Elena's perfect facade appeared on a sweltering July afternoon when I came home early from a local delivery to surprise the kids. I had been away for only 2 days, but I missed them terribly and wanted to take them swimming at the community pool. As I pulled into the driveway, I could hear shouting coming from inside the house. Not the normal sounds of children playing or even arguing, but something harsher, more frightening. I rushed to the front door and let myself in, following the sound of Elena's voice coming from the kitchen. I said, "Sit down and finish your lunch." Elena was yelling at Mason, who was standing beside his chair with tears streaming down his face. "I don't care if you don't like it. You'll eat every bite or you'll sit there until bedtime." The plate in front of my 5-year-old son contained what looked like a sandwich made with some kind of meat he clearly found disgusting, along with vegetables that had been cooked until they were mushy and unappetizing. Mason was a picky eater, like most kids his age, but Elena had always been patient with his food preferences before. "What's going on here?" I asked, stepping into the kitchen. Elena spun around, and for just a split second, I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Anger, frustration, and something else I couldn't quite identify. But the expression was gone so quickly, I wondered if I had imagined it. "Marcus," she said, her voice immediately returning to its usual warm tone. "You're home early. I was just trying to get Mason to eat his lunch. He's been very difficult today." I looked at my son, who ran to me and wrapped his arms around my legs. "Daddy, I don't like the sandwich," he whispered. "It tastes yucky." I knelt down to his level and examined the sandwich. It appeared to be some kind of liver spread, something I knew Mason had never eaten before and would naturally find revolting. "Why don't we make you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich instead, buddy?" I suggested. "No," Elena said firmly. "He needs to learn to eat what's put in front of him. You can't cater to his pickiness forever, Marcus. It's not good for him." There was something in her tone that bothered me, an authority that felt presumptuous, a harshness that seemed out of character. "He's 5 years old, Elena. There's nothing wrong with letting him have foods he actually likes." Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Fine," she said, "but don't come crying to me when he refuses to eat anything but junk food." The interaction left me feeling unsettled, but I pushed the feeling aside. Elena had been under a lot of stress lately, working extra shifts at the hospital and spending so much time helping with my kids. Everyone had bad days, and maybe I had just caught her at a particularly frustrating moment. But over the following weeks, I began to notice other small changes in Elena's behavior. She seemed less patient with the children's normal childhood antics. When Lily spilled juice on her shirt, Elena's reaction seemed disproportionately annoyed. When Emma asked for help tying her shoes, Elena would sigh heavily before assisting her, as if the request was a major inconvenience. The children began to seem more subdued when Elena was around. They were quicker to apologize for minor mistakes, more careful about making noise or leaving toys out. When I asked them about it, they would just shrug and say Elena liked things to be neat and quiet. "She says we need to be more grown up," Lily explained one evening as I tucked her into bed. "She says big kids don't make messes or cry about little things." This concerned me. My children were 5 years old. They were supposed to make messes and cry about little things sometimes. That was part of being a child, but when I tried to discuss it with Elena, she became defensive. "I'm trying to teach them responsibility and self-control," she said. "These are important life skills, Marcus. Would you rather they grow up to be spoiled and entitled?" Her logic seemed sound, but something about it didn't feel right. The children I had raised to be confident and expressive were becoming cautious and reserved. at least when Elena was around. The second major red flag came in August, when I returned from a 3-day haul to find that Elena had rearranged the children's bedrooms without consulting me. She had moved furniture, changed the decorations, and gotten rid of several items that had sentimental value. "Where's Mason's stuffed elephant?" I asked, noticing that his beloved toy was missing from his bed. He had slept with that elephant every night since he was 2 years old. "Oh, that old thing," Elena said dismissively. "I threw it away. It was falling apart and probably full of germs. He's too old for stuffed animals anyway." I felt my blood pressure spike. "You threw away his comfort object without asking me?" "Marcus, he's 5 years old. He needs to learn to sleep without a security blanket. I was helping him grow up." Mason was devastated when he realized his elephant was gone. He cried for hours, and nothing I said could comfort him. Elena watched his breakdown with what seemed like irritation rather than sympathy. "This is exactly why I got rid of it," she said. "Look how dependent he was on that thing." This is better for him in the long run. But it wasn't better for him. Mason had trouble sleeping for weeks afterward, and his behavior during the day became more anxious and clingy. I ended up buying him a new stuffed animal, which Elena clearly disapproved of, though she didn't say anything directly. Around this same time, I began to notice that Elena was asking a lot of questions about my finances. She would inquire about my trucking contracts, my savings account, the life insurance policy I had taken out after my father's death. At first, her questions seemed like natural curiosity from someone who cared about our family's security. "I just want to make sure you and the children are protected," she would say. "You work such a dangerous job, and you're all they have. Have you thought about updating your will since your father passed away?" I hadn't, actually. My will was outdated, still listing Sarah as my beneficiary, and my father as the children's guardian in case something happened to me. Elena's suggestion made practical sense, but something about the way she brought it up repeatedly made me uncomfortable. "Who would take care of the children if something happened to you?" she asked one evening, as we sat reviewing some paperwork related to my father's estate. "My parents are gone, and Sarah obviously can't," I said. "I guess it would have to be my sister, though she lives across the country and has her own family to worry about." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "That would be so hard on the children, being uprooted from everything they know and love. They'd be so much better off with someone who already knows them, someone who's already part of their daily lives." The implication was clear, and while it made logical sense, something about the conversation felt calculated rather than caring. The third warning sign came in September, when I discovered that Elena had been going through my personal belongings while I was away. I found papers from my father's estate moved around in my desk, and my laptop had clearly been used. The browser history showed searches I hadn't made. When I confronted Elena about it, she had a ready explanation. "I was looking for the contact information for your insurance agent," she said. "You mentioned wanting to update your policies, and I thought I could help by gathering the information while you were on the road." Again, her explanation was reasonable, but the violation of my privacy felt wrong. I hadn't asked her to research insurance policies, and I certainly hadn't given her permission to go through my personal files. "Please don't go through my things without asking," I said firmly. "I appreciate your help, but I need you to respect my boundaries." Elena's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of apologizing, she became defensive and then turned the situation around on me. "I can't believe you're making this about boundaries when I'm trying to help your family," she said, her voice taking on a hurt tone. "I've been working myself to death taking care of your children, sacrificing my own time and energy, and this is the thanks I get. Suspicion and accusations." I felt guilty immediately. Elena had been incredibly helpful, and maybe I was being paranoid. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to sound ungrateful. I just like to handle my own affairs." "Fine," Elena said coldly. From now on, I'll mind my own business. Don't ask me to help with anything that involves your personal information. But even as I apologized, something nagged at me. Elena's reaction seemed designed to make me feel guilty for setting a reasonable boundary. And the searches on my computer hadn't been about insurance policies. They had been about inheritance laws and life insurance payouts. The fourth and most disturbing incident happened in October. I had been delayed by weather and wouldn't be home until late, so Elena was handling the children's bedtime routine. When I finally arrived home around midnight, I expected to find the house quiet, and Elena either gone or asleep in the guest room where she sometimes stayed when I was running late. Instead, I found her in my bedroom, going through the jewelry box that had belonged to my late mother. She was holding my mother's wedding ring, examining it closely under the bedside lamp. "Elena?" I said from the doorway. "What are you doing?" She startled, dropping the ring back into the jewelry box. "Oh, Marcus, you scared me. I was looking for some aspirin. I have a terrible headache, and I thought you might have some in your nightstand. But the aspirin was in the bathroom medicine cabinet, not in my mother's jewelry box. And Elena was a nurse. She would know where people typically kept medications. The aspirin is in the bathroom," I said carefully. "Right. Of course. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking clearly. This headache has me all confused." Elena moved quickly toward the door. I should probably head home and get some rest. After she left, I checked the jewelry box carefully. Nothing appeared to be missing, but several pieces had been moved around. My mother's engagement ring, which had been my father's final gift to her before he died, was in a different compartment than where I always kept it. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the small incidents that had been accumulating over the past few months. Individually, each one could be explained away, but together, they painted a picture that made me deeply uncomfortable. Elena's behavior toward my children had become increasingly controlling and harsh. She was asking probing questions about my finances and inheritance. She was going through my personal belongings and lying about her reasons. And now she was examining my family's valuable jewelry in the middle of the night. I began to wonder if the woman I had grown to care for, the woman I had been considering as a potential stepmother for my children, was not who she appeared to be. Have you ever had someone in your life who seemed perfect at first, but then small things started adding up that made you question their true intentions? How did you handle those growing suspicions? The night that changed everything was February 14th, Valentine's Day. I had been planning to surprise Elena and the kids by coming home 3 days early from a cross-country haul to Denver. I had even bought Elena a small gift, a silver necklace with a heart pendant, thinking that maybe it was time to take our relationship to the next level. The drive home through the winter storm was treacherous. Snow was falling heavily, and the temperature had dropped to well below freezing. I kept thinking about how nice it would be to walk into a warm house, to see my children's faces light up when they realized Daddy was home early, to spend a quiet evening with Elena after the kids went to bed. I had called ahead to let Elena know I was coming, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I assumed she was probably helping the kids with homework or getting them ready for bed. It was almost 9 p.m. when I finally pulled into my driveway, exhausted but excited to be home. The first thing I noticed was that most of the lights in the house were off, which was unusual. Elena always kept the porch light on, and usually had the living room lamp burning when she was watching the kids in the evening. The second thing I noticed was Elena's car parked in the driveway, with the engine running and the trunk open. But it was the third thing I noticed that made my blood turn to ice. There, in my backyard, barely visible in the swirling snow, were 3 small figures huddled together near the back fence. My children, my babies, outside in a blizzard, wearing nothing but their pajamas. I ran toward them, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. "Lily, Mason, Emma," I shouted over the wind. And I will never forget the expression of pure relief and desperate hope on their faces. They were shivering violently, their lips blue with cold, their small bodies pressed together for warmth. Snow had accumulated on their hair and shoulders, and their bare feet were red and swollen from the cold. "Daddy!" Emma cried, stumbling toward me through the snow. "Daddy, you came back." I scooped all three of them into my arms, feeling how cold their little bodies were, how they trembled against me like frightened animals. "What are you doing outside?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear and rage. "Where is Elena?" "She told us to come outside and play a game," Lily said through chattering teeth. "She said we had to stay out here until she came to get us, but she never came back." "How long have you been out here?" I demanded, carrying them toward the house. "I don't know," Mason whispered. "A really long time. We got so cold, Daddy. We thought maybe you weren't coming home." I rushed them inside and immediately turned up the heat, wrapping them in blankets and checking their fingers and toes for signs of frostbite. They were hypothermic, but alive, and that was all that mattered in that moment. "Where is Elena?" I asked again, as I rubbed Emma's frozen hands between mine. "She's in your room with a man," Jade said quietly. "She told us the man was helping her pack for a trip, and we had to go outside so we wouldn't bother them." My vision went red. Elena had put my children outside in a blizzard so she could be with another man in my house. She had risked their lives for her own selfish purposes. I got the kids settled in the living room with hot chocolate and extra blankets. Then I marched upstairs to confront the woman I had trusted with my most precious treasures. I could hear voices coming from my bedroom, Elena's voice and a man's voice I didn't recognize. I didn't bother knocking. I threw open the door to find Elena stuffing clothes and jewelry into a suitcase, while a tall, thin man I'd never seen before was disconnecting my television from the wall. "What the hell is going on here?" I roared. Elena spun around, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw her true face. Gone was the warm, caring expression I had grown accustomed to. In its place was something cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. "Marcus," she said calmly, as if finding her stealing from me while my children nearly froze to death outside was perfectly normal. "You're early." "My children were outside in the snow," I shouted. "They could have died. What kind of monster puts children outside in a blizzard?" Elena shrugged, actually shrugged, as if my children's lives were of no consequence to her. "They're fine." "Children are tougher than you think." The man with her, tall, greasy-looking with the kind of face you'd cross the street to avoid, was still trying to steal my television. "Elena, we need to go," he said nervously. "You said we'd be gone before he got back." "We're almost finished," Elena replied, then turned back to me with that same chilling calm. "Marcus, you should know that this isn't personal. Well, not entirely personal. You're just not what I need anymore." "P, what you need?" I stared at her in disbelief. "What about what my children need? What about everything you said about loving them, about wanting to be part of our family?" Elena laughed, and the sound was like ice cracking. "Oh, Marcus, you really believed all that? You actually thought I cared about your bratty little kids?" The casual cruelty in her voice, the way she dismissed my children as if they were nothing more than inconveniences, made me want to put my hands around her throat. But I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to understand what was happening, needed to know how deep this betrayal went. "Then why," I asked, "why did you spend all those months pretending to care about us?" Elena continued packing as she talked, as if we were having a casual conversation, instead of discussing the destruction of my family. Your father's inheritance, obviously. Did you really think I didn't know about the money he left you? The life insurance payout, the property? My father had left me a modest inheritance, enough to secure my children's future, but nothing that would make someone rich. There's not that much money, Elena. $50,000 is a lot of money to someone like me, she replied. Plus the house. Plus your life insurance policy that I helped you update. Remember? The one that names me as beneficiary and guardian of the children. My blood ran cold. I had updated my will and life insurance policy at Elena's suggestion. But I had named my sister as the children's guardian, not Elena. I didn't name you as their guardian. Elena smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. Check your paperwork, Marcus. You might be surprised at what you signed. The man with her was getting increasingly agitated. Elena, we need to leave now. Take what you can carry, and let's go. What about my children? I demanded. What was your plan for them? Elena's expression didn't change. They were never part of the long-term plan, Marcus. Children are expensive, demanding, and frankly, I never wanted to be anyone's mother. I was hoping you'd have an accident on the road. Trucking is such a dangerous profession. But you turned out to be disappointingly careful. The full scope of her evil was becoming clear. She had been planning my death, planning to inherit my money and property, and planning to get rid of my children. You were going to kill them. Not personally, Elena said, as if this distinction mattered. But children who lose both parents sometimes have tragic accidents. House fires, drowning incidents, that sort of thing. Very sad, but these things happen. I felt like I was going to be sick. This woman, this monster, had been living in my house, caring for my children, all while planning to murder them for money. The man you're with, I said, looking at her accomplice, who was now loading my father's antique watch collection into a bag. He was going to help you kill my children? Danny has experience with these kinds of situations, Elena said, matter-of-factly. But honestly, Marcus, your timing tonight was terrible. We were supposed to be long gone before you got home. The children were supposed to be found frozen in the morning, tragic victims of a terrible accident. Poor little ones must have wandered outside during the storm and gotten lost. The casual way she described murdering my babies made me see red. I lunged toward her, but Danny pulled out a knife. Stay back, he warned. We're leaving, and you're not going to stop us. You're not taking anything from this house, I said. My voice deadly quiet. Elena laughed again. Actually, we are. You see, Marcus, I've been planning this for months. I know where you keep your important papers, your spare cash, your father's valuable items. I know your bank account numbers, your social security number, everything I need to clean you out financially. She held up a folder full of documents. Identity theft is so easy when someone trusts you completely. I've already transferred most of your savings to accounts you don't know about. By the time you figure out what's missing, Danny and I will be in Mexico, living very comfortably on your father's inheritance. I realized that Elena's betrayal went far deeper than I had imagined. She hadn't just been planning to kill my children. She had been systematically stealing from me for months, using my trust and access to my home to rob me blind. The jewelry you were looking at, I said, remembering the night I'd found her in my bedroom. You were cataloging what was worth stealing. Your mother had excellent taste, Elena replied. Those pieces will bring a nice price. Danny was getting more nervous by the minute. Elena, we need to go now. The kids are probably calling the police. The children don't know how to call the police, Elena said dismissively. They're 5 years old. But she was wrong. While we had been talking, I had heard movement downstairs, and now I could hear sirens in the distance. My smart, brave children, had somehow managed to call for help. Elena's calm facade finally cracked when she heard the sirens. "Damn it," she hissed. "Those little brats." "They're not brats," I said fiercely. "They're heroes. And they're going to be safe, which is more than I can say for you." The police arrived within minutes, surrounding the house and ordering Elena and Danny to come out with their hands up. Elena tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Danny dropped the knife and surrendered immediately, but Elena fought like a wild animal, screaming obscenities and threats until the officers finally got her in handcuffs. As they led her away, Elena turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over, Marcus," she snarled. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." But I did know what she was capable of. She was capable of murdering children for money. She was capable of betraying the deepest trust. She was capable of evil that most people couldn't even imagine. If you discovered that someone you trusted completely had been planning to harm your family, how do you think you would react? What would be the hardest part of that betrayal to overcome? The aftermath of that terrible night was almost as traumatic as the night itself. The police investigation revealed the full scope of Elena's deception, and what they uncovered was far worse than I had imagined. Elena Martinez wasn't even her real name. Her actual name was Elena Vasquez, and she had a criminal record spanning 3 states. She had been married 4 times, and 2 of her previous husbands had died under suspicious circumstances. One had supposedly fallen down the stairs in his own home. Another had died in what appeared to be a random mugging. But the mugger was never caught, and nothing was actually stolen. The police detective assigned to our case, Detective Sarah Chen, sat me down 3 days after Elena's arrest to explain what they had discovered. "Mr. Williams," she said gently, "I need you to understand how close you and your children came to becoming statistics. Elena Vasquez is what we call a black widow, someone who targets vulnerable people, gains their trust, and then eliminates them for financial gain." Detective Chen showed me a file thick with evidence. Elena had been researching my family for months before she ever approached me at my father's funeral. She knew about my father's illness, my wife's addiction, my financial situation, even my work schedule. Her appearance at the funeral hadn't been a coincidence. It had been a carefully planned first move in a deadly game. She specifically targets single fathers, Detective Chen explained. Men who are overwhelmed, grieving, and desperate for help with their children. She presents herself as the perfect solution to their problems, and by the time they realize what she really is, it's too late. The forged documents Elena had shown me were sophisticated fakes. She had somehow managed to alter my will and life insurance policy, making herself the beneficiary and guardian of my children. If her plan had succeeded, if I had died in a trucking accident or been murdered by her accomplice Danny, she would have inherited everything and gained legal custody of Lily, Mason, and Emma. What would have happened to my children? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Detective Chen's expression was grim. Based on her pattern with previous victims, the children would have died within 6 months of your death. House fires, drowning accidents, falls. She's very creative in making murders look like tragic accidents. The thought of my babies suffering at Elena's hands, of them crying for their daddy while she hurt them, was almost more than I could bear. But they were safe now, and that was what mattered. The financial damage Elena had inflicted was extensive but not irreparable. She had managed to steal about $15,000 from my accounts and had sold several pieces of my mother's jewelry. But the bulk of my father's inheritance was still intact. More importantly, she hadn't had time to take out any loans or credit cards in my name. which could have destroyed my credit for years. Danny, Elena's accomplice, turned out to be her current boyfriend, and a career criminal with a long history of burglary and assault. He agreed to testify against Elena in exchange for a reduced sentence, and his testimony revealed the full horror of what they had planned for my family. She talked about it like it was a business transaction, Danny told the prosecutor. She said the kids were just loose ends that needed to be tied up. She had it all planned out, how she'd make it look like they wandered outside during a storm and froze to death, how she'd play the grieving stepmother, how she'd sell the house and disappear with the money. The trial took place 8 months later, and I had to testify about Elena's behavior, about the way she had gradually gained access to my life and my children's trust. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, standing in that courtroom and describing how completely I had been fooled by someone so evil. Elena showed no remorse during the trial. She sat at the defendant's table with the same cold, calculating expression I had seen that night in my bedroom. When she took the stand in her own defense, she actually tried to claim that she had genuinely cared about my children and that Danny had forced her to participate in the scheme, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, identity theft, child endangerment, and a dozen other charges. The judge sentenced Elena to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As they led her away in shackles, she turned to look at me one last time, and I saw something in her eyes that chilled me to the bone. Not remorse or regret, but fury that her plan had failed. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently, the same words she had said the night she was arrested. But it was over, at least the legal part. The emotional healing would take much longer. My children had been through trauma that no child should ever experience. They had nightmares for months afterward. Emma would wake up screaming, convinced that Elena was coming back to hurt her. Mason became clingy and anxious, afraid to let me out of his sight. Lily, my brave little girl who had somehow managed to call 911 that night, developed the stutter that took months of therapy to overcome. We all went to counseling, individual therapy for each of the kids, and family therapy for all of us together. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, no relation to Elena, thankfully, helped us process what had happened and learn to trust again. "Your children are remarkably resilient," Dr. Martinez told me after several months of sessions. "They've been through something terrible, but they have something that will help them heal. They have a father who loves them unconditionally and who fought to protect them." The healing process was slow and sometimes painful. There were setbacks and difficult days, but gradually my children began to smile again, to laugh again, to trust again. They learned that not all adults who seemed kind were actually dangerous, but they also learned to listen to their instincts when something didn't feel right. I had to learn to trust my own instincts again, too. Elena's betrayal had shaken my confidence in my ability to judge people, to protect my family, to make good decisions. For months, I second-guessed every interaction, every new person who came into our lives. But slowly, with the help of therapy and the love of my children, I began to heal too. I realized that Elena's evil didn't reflect any failing on my part. I had been a grieving widower trying to do right by his children, and she had exploited that vulnerability. That made her a predator, not me a fool. 2 years after Elena's conviction, I made the decision to sell the house where so much trauma had occurred and move to a new town about an hour away. It was a fresh start for all of us, a chance to build new memories in a place that wasn't haunted by Elena's presence. The kids adapted well to the move. They made new friends, started at a new school, and began to seem like their old selves again. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. Mason's anxiety decreased. Lily's stutter disappeared completely. As for me, I eventually began dating again, though very carefully and very slowly. I learned to recognize red flags that I had missed with Elena. People who seemed too good to be true, who pushed for intimacy too quickly, who asked too many questions about my finances or my children's routines. When I did meet someone I was interested in, I took things extremely slowly. Background checks, references from previous employers, conversations with people who had known them for years. My children's safety was worth any amount of caution or awkwardness. 3 years after the trial, I met Jennifer, a teacher at my children's school who had been working there for over a decade. She was patient with my caution, understanding about my past, and genuinely caring toward my children. We dated for 2 years before I even introduced her to the kids, and another year before we moved in together. Jennifer understood that my children would always come first, that their safety and well-being were non-negotiable. She never pushed for more access or authority than I was comfortable giving her. She earned their trust and mine through consistency, patience, and genuine love. We married last spring, 5 years after Elena's conviction. It was a small ceremony with just our families and closest friends. Lily, Mason, and Emma were our wedding party, and seeing their happy faces as Jennifer and I exchanged vows was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. Elena is still in prison, and according to her sentence, she will die there. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about what she did, if she has any regret for the lives she destroyed and the children she tried to murder. But mostly, I try not to think about her at all. Instead, I focus on the life we've built, a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of genuine happiness that Elena could never understand or appreciate. My children are thriving. They're confident, kind, and resilient. They know they are loved and protected, and they know that their father will always fight for them. The experience with Elena taught us all valuable lessons about trust, about recognizing manipulation, about the importance of listening to our instincts. But more importantly, it taught us about the power of love to overcome even the darkest evil. My children survived because they were smart and brave, but also because they knew without a doubt that their father loved them and would come home to them. That love gave them the strength to endure, to call for help, to believe that rescue would come. And in the end, love won. Evil tried to destroy our family, but love was stronger. What's the most important lesson you think people should take away from Marcus and his children's story? How can we protect ourselves and our loved ones from predators like Elena, while still remaining open to genuine love and connection? Thank you for staying with us through this incredible and terrifying true story. Marcus and his children's experience reminds us that evil can wear a beautiful mask, but it also shows us that love, courage, and family bonds are stronger than any darkness that tries to destroy them. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might need to recognize the warning signs we've discussed today. And remember, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your gut feelings exist to protect you and the people you love. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and never forget that love always wins in the end.